Tonight is the debate between the presidential candidates on foreign policy. So I thought we'd start off with foreign policy. And always the critical issue between the U.S. and Korea is North Korea and nuclear proliferation. I'd like to just toss it probably first to Ambassador Kim to give an update on where the U.S. stands in its efforts to try to get North Korea to abide, and also whether the change in leadership that's recently occurred in North Korea has perhaps changed the landscape on that issue.
Thank you very much. Maybe before I get started with this very difficult question, let me thank the Asia Society for organizing this event. Thank you very much, and thanks to Abram Kim and his colleagues at KEI for recommending that we make Houston the first stop. In fact, I wasn't sure about it, but having spent just a few hours here, I'm convinced that he was right. So thank you very much. And of course, to Randy and David for organizing our whole trip. It's great to be here. Although I learned this morning that from a Texas congressman that you said you all, right? But I was told that when you're referring to the group, it has to be all you all. Is that right?
All y'all.
So, see, already I'm talking better Texan than you are. North Korea, as Abe mentioned, I worked on North Korean nuclear issues for a few years before I was assigned to Seoul. And it's hard to imagine a more difficult challenge on the foreign policy front than dealing with North Korea on many fronts. In fact, we were just talking about the human rights problem in North Korea. In terms of our policy, I think we have always been open to serious engagement, serious diplomacy, serious negotiation with North Korea. But North Koreans have to be committed to the whole process. They need to make a decision that they're in fact willing to make a real effort towards denuclearization and in fact addressing any other concerns we have with their missile program, the human rights situation. It's frankly, given all of the difficulties we've had with our previous efforts, we're a little reluctant, we're a little cautious about just re-engaging the North Koreans unless we see some concrete signal that they're ready to engage in a serious effort with us. But if they are, we're more than prepared, in cooperation with South Korea and other partners in the region, to make another run at addressing issues like denuclearization. You mentioned the new leadership. Obviously, we hope that the new leadership will make the right decisions to help its people to deal constructively with us and South Korea and others in the region. I think it's a little too early to tell whether some of those things we're seeing in North Korea actually amount to a serious reform effort by North Korea. But obviously, we're watching very closely. And I think on any aspect of North Korea policy, the critical part is that we continue to cooperate very closely with South Korea. I think coordination between Washington and Seoul will remain very important as we move forward with the North Korea challenge.
Ambassador Choi, would you care to add your perspective on what could move forward the North Korea situation?
I'd like to commend our moderator, Alain, to pick up the most complex issue facing Seoul and Washington for the years to come. As you remember, since the eruption of North Korean nuclear question in the early 1990s, with the three agreements, 1994 Geneva Agreement Framework, 2005 September 19th agreement, then this year Leap Day Agreement, all didn't succeed. But we learned the lesson through these trials and errors. That is, North Korean nuclear question is not something, a card they invented to negotiate away. This program, nuclear program, is a part of their regime survival scheme. If we arrive at that conclusion, we have to accept that we have to look into larger problem, which is North Korean problem itself. So that will be the challenge we will be facing next year, attacking or dealing with the North Korean problem, the larger one, within which North Korean nuclear question exists. The obvious answer is very simple. If North Korea stop emulating Soviet Union and start to copy what happened in China, that we'll have a solution because North Korea will accept investment and engage in trade with us, become interdependent. They will naturally resolve nuclear question, and North Korea become a stable country. But problem is the decision to arrive at this strategic realization does not depend us, depends on Pyongyang. We cannot force them to adopt it. We cannot lead them to arrive at this realization. They have to somehow make this realization. So we have to wait for their coming into terms with their own difficulties. In the meantime, based on the alliance, U.S.-Korea alliance, we have to manage the process so that under any circumstances, North Korea will not explode. The outcome must be a soft landing.
There have been some rumblings that there might be some economic reform in North Korea. In August, there was an announcement that they might try some economic reforms like China. What do you hear in the Korean government? What do you believe these things might actually come to fruition?
There are very intriguing and interesting signs happening in Pyongyang, such as you have now 1 million cell phones in Pyongyang, and many cars are now in Pyongyang to even provoke a slight traffic jam in the afternoon. You have shops, restaurants mushrooming in Pyongyang, but all these are limited only in Pyongyang, not outside. This will pose its own intriguing question, but problem is, do this change represent a fundamental reorientation of the North Korean policy from military to economy? On that, we have not seen the real sign. So I think it's prudent for us to wait and see whether North Korea will be really changing the fundamental direction of their future, or these are simply cosmetic, superficial changes.
Okay. We were talking at lunch earlier that really left in sometimes the background are the human rights issues. And I know here in Houston, many of the churches are very involved and very interested in seeing the human rights abuses in North Korea, tackled. Is there anything the U.S. can do, or what are you doing as the ambassador in Korea to help, attack the human rights abuses in North Korea?
But you're right that the human rights situation in North Korea remains just horrible, and we remain deeply concerned about it. I think the President, Secretary Clinton, and others have spoken out quite publicly about this problem. This is another aspect of North Korea, the policy that we coordinate very closely with our South Korean colleagues, and I know that obviously the South Korean public, South Korean government are quite concerned about the situation as well. We also try to raise awareness, sort of the international community's awareness as well. We have a special envoy for North Korea human rights, Ambassador Bob King, who spends all of his time looking at how we can try to improve this human rights situation in North Korea. It's obviously a huge challenge, but I think we will continue to work with South Korea and others in the region and the international community to try to raise awareness and find ways to deal with this problem.
Just to be clear, is the U.S. giving any food aid to North Korea right now?
No, in fact, this was one of the disappointing developments of this year, is that you may have seen that earlier this year we had what we thought was an understanding with the North Koreans for us to provide some carefully monitored, carefully calibrated humanitarian assistance, food aid to North Korea. But they made it impossible for us to proceed with that when, in violation of Security Council resolutions and all sorts of other commitments, they decided to launch a long-range missile. So again, we find ourselves not being able to do the things that we want to do to try to help the North Korean people because of the government's actions.
Was that really a long-range missile? I don't think that went very far, did it?
Same technology.
Ambassador Choi, let me just give you the floor. If there's something that you as the representative of South Korea would like the U.S. to do that perhaps we haven't been as confrontational or as hard or as perhaps as diplomatic as you would like us, America, to be in dealings with North Korea or perhaps the other members of the six-party talks, Is there any, advice or suggestions you might make towards U.S. stances?
You are right to ask the question because for the last 20 years, there has been contrast between Seoul and Washington. Sometimes Seoul was more conservative, while Washington was liberal, and the other way around. But now, I think we learned the lesson, and we know how to deal with North Korea. So there is sort of a consensus cutting across all opinions in Congress, in press, in academia, think tanks, that how to deal with North Korea is to remain firm on principle, but flexible how to really approach North Korean question. So I think the margin of contrast between Seoul and Washington has diminished a great deal because now we understand better the nature of North Korean nuclear question and North Korean problem itself.
Okay. Let me turn to a slightly different issue, China. China has become, it seems, much more confrontational in the region. Just last week, I understand, a Chinese fisherman was killed in a confrontation with some Chinese fishing boats in Korean waters. What do you make of this sort of new confrontational stance of China? And is it related perhaps to the change of power that's going on there this fall?
Another important question. South Korea is perhaps the only country in the whole world which has survived almost 3,000 years of China's dominance, overbearing attitude throughout the history. We made it. So we know how to interpret how to deal with China. I would rather qualify what China is showing these days towards the neighboring countries rather overbearing rather than confrontational. That is, we have to always be wary about Chinese becoming overbearing, over-dominant, unbearably arrogant. But having said this, I would like to underline the importance of how to manage China. That is, China is unlike Soviet Union. In other words, China is firmly on board with us, US and Korea, with a trade paradigm. That country has determined its future course to prosper and look after its people with economy and trade, not military buildup and confrontation. So our job for US and Korea is to manage our relationship with China through engagement, not through confrontation or isolation. By engagement, we'll increase interdependence between us and China. That will make the entire region more peaceful and prosperous.
Ambassador Kim, how do you think the U.S. should act in that part of the world to help, sort of not confront China, but keep China in check at the same time, not make a confrontation with China?
Right. I mean, I agree with what Ambassador Choi said. I mean, I don't think anybody gains anything by having a confrontation with China. I think what we want is to have a constructive relationship with China. Look, I mean, China is a big, important country. It has responsibilities as a big, important, rising country. And we want to work with China to make sure that they play a responsible, constructive role on the international stage and in the region. So I think we will continue to have constructive relations based on mutual respect, but also taking into consideration mutual interests.
I'll try to. One of the presidential candidates has said on his first day in office, if elected, that he would call China a currency manipulator, which the U.S. has declined to do heretofore. What do you think of that stance? What would be the impact of that?
So just before we got on the stage, he said, "God, you're so bold to be participating in this public forum with the political developments happening in town, and yet you asked me to answer this question."
You're a diplomat.
I have no comment on that.
No comment. Okay. Well, let me ask also. You mentioned, you were born in Korea, the first, you served in Korea and now have gone there as the first Korean ambassador. Let me ask you a personal question. How have you seen Korea change, during your time there?
Yeah, I've often thought about, sort of what has surprised me the most going back to Korea as the U.S. ambassador. I have to say, I've had some opportunity to sort of take measurement, because earlier in my foreign service career, I was assigned to Seoul 20-some years ago as a junior officer. And then about 10 years ago, I had another assignment to Seoul. So I've seen sort of in decade spans. I have to say, it's still mind-boggling to me just how much Korea has grown. And it's not just physically. Obviously, you visit Seoul and you see the magnificent, one of the most vibrant cities anywhere in the globe. But I think more important is sort of the political transition, the democratization. Korea is one of the most vibrant democracies we have anywhere. Also important, I think, is people's mindset and attitudes. I think Koreans in general are much more global, much more open-minded than ever before, and that's a good development. So I have to say, across the board, I've been very impressed by the changes that have taken place in Korea.
And let me ask Ambassador Choi, you've actually served here in America before when things were much more bipartisan, and now you're the ambassador in a very contentious time. What is your perspective on America these days from your time being here before? How has it changed?
Next year will mark the 60th anniversary of Korean War armistice. So I'm attending many meetings, ceremonies marking this important event. What I hear is from many Korean War veterans, we Americans helped many other countries throughout the history by our servicemen, servicewomen. But Korea is the only country which really appreciates and thanks our contribution. And more than that, when I met the ex-American Peace Corps members served in Korea, they also confirmed that they sent out Peace Corps volunteers to tens of countries. Korea is the only country that initiated a revisit program for the ex-Peace Corps volunteers. Why? Because Korea recognized the friendship and cooperation, how important it was for Korea. 60 years ago, Korea was any country like a developing country. Now we are ranked around the 10th in every aspect, trade, economy, culture, sports even. Remember that Korea earned the 5th many medals in London Olympics. So that is, we owe it to American people, and America recognizes it. And some people say that perhaps Korean War was the most productive enterprise America has ever made abroad. So this is the feeling I have as Korean ambassador in Washington, recognition both ways. So this is a really great time for any Korean diplomat serving in Washington. So I have a sense of fulfillment and promise for the future with which I'm serving my post.
Great. Well, let's turn to economic matters. The other day in one of the presidential debates, again, Governor Romney said that Mr. President Obama had not signed any free trade agreements during his time as president. That kind of confused me a little bit. I think there was a free trade agreement, wasn't there? And
no, this is a fact. At least there are 3, Korea, Colombia, and Peru.
So bring us up to date. They've been signed, they've been implemented. Are they having an effect now on trade between the countries?
Because in Korea there is such a huge topic, is sometimes controversial. We have been monitoring month by month the effect of FTA on economies of both countries. It's evidently too early. It's only 7 months ago. But the 6-month record shows clearly that it's beneficial for both countries. You may have heard and seen some politicians say that FTA benefits much more Korea than United States because our export Korea decreased while our import from Korea increased, which may be true. But that those kind of results refers only to the overall volume. Even though FTA does not exist, it would have been the same. So we have to look into the contents of the import-export. If you analyze it a little bit, you'll realize that those items affected by FTA increased a great deal in both ways. U.S. export to Korea benefit a great deal from FTA and vice versa. So FTA is working so far, and I remain confident it will work in the future to come.
And Ambassador Kim, I guess you were lucky to be ambassador when the free trade agreement was signed. Were you involved in the negotiation, or have you been involved in the implementation of the agreement?
I think all of us are involved in the implementation of the agreement. I mean, this is a historical agreement, second largest free trade agreement since NAFTA. There's huge opportunity for both countries, companies in both countries, and consumers in both countries. I agree with Ambassador Choi that early signs of implementation are quite encouraging, but we're only 6 months into implementation, so we'll have to continue to watch. But I think it's clear that there is a huge opportunity for both countries. I mean, tariffs on most items were eliminated immediately on the Korean side. So I think there will continue to be strong interest in U.S. companies in exporting and investing in Korea, and vice versa as well.
I've read that the biggest exports from Texas to Korea are computers and chemicals, but given that we're in Texas, I have to ask about beef. And exports of U.S. beef to Korea is a very controversial subject. Are tariffs all removed, or all non-tariff barriers removed on beef? Are the exports going?
U.S. beef exports to Korea are continuing to be very strong. It has always been strong, and I think it's going to continue to grow in market share. My sense is that Koreans actually enjoy U.S. beef quite a bit, and so I think the prospects are quite bright.
I thought there were some protests a while back about the U.S. beef imports, and there were some problems with that. Have they been resolved?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few years ago there was some controversy regarding U.S. beef exports to Korea, but the FTA negotiations took about 5 years, and obviously agriculture products were the most sensitive aspects of negotiations. So I think the concerns on both sides have been addressed adequately.
And Ambassador Choi, in terms of other economic cooperation in the region, how do you think the U.S. can work with Korea to help develop, mutually those two countries and also wider in the region?
Right after Second World War, all East Asian countries remained poor and war-stricken. At the time, East Asia accounted for only 10% of global economic output. Now, thanks to American market and trade with America majorly, this region represents 30% of global economic output. That means you have in East Asia the largest market in the world. There you have 1.6 billion people focusing on education and hard work. That means increased purchasing power. So the future market is in East Asia. The largest, of course, is China, Japan. And Korea is important because you have a window of opportunity in Korea, because in terms of degree of ease of doing business, Korea is one of the top, according to the report published by World Bank last year. In terms of reinforcing contract, Korea is second in the world. So in terms of rule of law, transparency, Korea, you can have either bridgehead for your business, or you can form a partnership with Korea with a large market, largest market in the world, China and other countries, in your perspective.
Specifically about Texas and Korea. Texas, we've got oil. Korea, y'all don't. Is there, and I know that, as a very energy-dependent country, Korea has to import all of its energy from outside the country. Recently we found lots of new natural gas here in Texas, and they say one of the markets is going to be Asia. We're going to send LNG, liquefied natural gas, to Asia. Do you think, is there anything that the U.S. government needs to do or the Korean government needs to do to help make those plans go forward?
Now with the question you're playing into my hands. Because with Ambassador Kim, we just visited the BG company. We were thoroughly briefed the relationship between LNG business between Texas and Korea. And this is not the only selling of LNG to Korea. The coal gas, Korea Gas, is the largest customer of BG Texas LNG business. But more than that, BG LNG is commissioning the LNG tankers from Korean shipbuilders. They so far bought 14. They have another 14 to order. So this is a two-way traffic benefiting both countries. And I asked what Korea represents in terms of your total business volume. They said more than 15%. So it will grow, the Texas and Korea, on LNG or also tanker export. This is only one business, but I'd like to also indicate the medical sector. Texas is known, Houston is known not only for the energy, but also first-rate medical technology in the whole world. So we intend to promote cooperation in this sector as well.
Okay. And Master, Choi, I mean, Kim, is there anything that you think that you know, the American government can be doing to help make those LNG exports get there faster?
Well, as Ambassador Choi pointed out, I think there's huge potential. I mean, it's already quite robust, but I think there is potential for growth as well. The only other point I would add is that in addition to looking at Korea as an attractive export market, I think there's also opportunity for cooperations and infrastructure investments in the energy sector. And I know at breakfast we spoke to some business reps who indicated interest. And I think that is quite exciting because I know that a number of Korean companies would want to explore the possibility of finding some cooperation in sort of infrastructure projects.
We're going to open it up for questions to the audience. I'm going to ask one more question, though. I've saved the tough one for last, and I'm going to ask Ambassador Kim about this. Being in Seoul, have you figured out what is Gangnam Style?
I've been waiting for this question. You know, I actually had a chance to meet Tsai, the man who invented Gangnam Style. He's a very pleasant young man, very talented, obviously. But I think he would be the first to tell you that he had no idea what he was doing when he created Gangnam Style. It's wonderfully entertaining, but other than that, I'm not sure.
Well, for their encore, both ambassadors have said that they would do the Gangnam Style dance, but we'll make sure everybody stays to the end for that. But for now, let's open it up to the audience for questions. You state your name first and stand up. I don't know if everybody heard that question. I don't know what's going on with the Korean election. You have one coming up.
There will be a crucial presidential election on 19th of December this year. Currently, there are three major candidates, one from ruling party, two from opposition parties. I think I can tell you this because it's every year in Korean newspaper. If three candidates remain until the end, they say they'll be the ruling party candidate. I have the great chance to prevail. That means there is a strong pressure for the two opposition parties to merge together. So the question is when and how they would merge. So you're waiting for this dramatic political event, greatest show on earth. I say in your country you'll be spending $6 billion to watch this greatest show on earth. In Korea also, we are investing heavily for this great show. We are delighted because our cousins in the north, they have a succession, predictable, no fun. But in Korea, every 5 years, we have this great fun, diplomatic election, democratic transition. So we're delighted to have this panorama unfolding before our eyes.
Zafta here. I'm an Asian American, a very proud Houstonian. Large Asian American population. And as an Asian American, I would like to see more Asian countries cast a more of a bigger imprint on the diplomatic stage of the world. Korea does not seem to have the diplomatic imprint that would do justice to its economic might. Why don't we see more involvement of Korea in international issues?
The explanation is very simple. The word you will be listening when you're in Korea is pali pali. That is quick, 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 and quick. In other words, you cannot imagine how Korea transformed itself politically, socially, diplomatically in the last 6 decades. Unimaginable. So the security is first, then economy, then cultural renaissance, along with diplomatic overture to outside world. So it's beginning to come. You will see more and more Korean involvement in international affairs and human rights and the principles. And for a foretaste, I'd like to introduce you that in Somalia area, Korean is the only ship capturing Somalian pirates. They are now in Seoul. So we are expanding rapidly.
Actually, if I might just add, I think if you look at what Korea has done just in recent couple of years, you'll see that the trend is definitely a much more prominent role on the international stage and international affairs. And they hosted the G20, they hosted the Nuclear Security Summit. They just last week were voted to host the Secretariat for the Green Climate Fund. They're now a member of the Security Council. So I think you're going to see Korea becoming much more active on the international stage, which I think is a good thing. And it's, frankly, on a number of these global challenges and transnational issues, I think U.S. and Korea working together is a wonderful partnership.
Ambassador Choi, I think, in my mind, like Eastern Europe, at some point, there's going to have to be some kind of unification, some kind of merger, some kind of relationship with South Korea to North Korea. By that I mean, at some point, South Korea is going to be the primary party responsible for economic development, not cultural, but economic. You understand what I'm saying? To bring North Korea into a more modern economic stage. Germany did that, but for several years, Germany took a heavy economic hit. Would South Korea, the government, and its people be up for that?
Thank you for your excellent question, which is actually looming very large in our mind, every Korean politician, diplomats, and scholars. But the question is very different. In case of Germany, it was reunified only after 70 years of existence. Bismarck unified Germany in 1870, and they reunified less than 100 years ago. Korea's case is we were one nation, one country for over 3,000 years. There is no argument whatsoever against our unifying North Korea, doing everything. It will be rather emotional more than legal terms. We will be approaching North Korean reunification question. And contrary to the enormity of difficulty, we have some silver linings. For example, North Korea, the illiteracy rate is 0. We have a very highly skilled labor force in North Korea to the tune of 25 million people, perhaps the most skilled, untapped labor forces in the entire world. So their infrastructure, though dilapidated, is there. The roads, the railroad, you have to only repair them. Remember that the Dandong, the city sharing border with North Korea, and North Korea was just like only 15 years ago. And South Korea and North Korea were very similar only over 3 decades ago. So that means, given time, North Korea can be made like China in 15 years and like South Korea in 30 years. there are many steps we have to take, and also what to do with China, with the alliance with the United States. Those are crucial questions. But for South Koreans, we must preserve alliance with the United States even after reunification, because it's essential foundation of Korean independence and prosperity, and for the regional stability as well. What you have to do is learning from German experience. We will keep American troops only in South Korean soil. That is, will allow a sort of a buffer in terms of foreign troops and foreign policy in former North Korean territory. That will be the condition we'll be offering to China when it comes to reunification. And there will be difficulties, but we'll do everything we can do to make our cousins' life easier after the unification.
Charles?
First of all, the welcome that I've received from Korea, and it's not just the government, it's not just the politicians, but for them, the general public has been incredibly warm. And I think that has helped me to do my job more effectively. I'm also grateful for the support I received from the Korean American community. I mean, I often tell friends that this has nothing to do with my abilities as a diplomat. I think the fact that I'm the first Korean American diplomat, first Korean American U.S. ambassador to Korea, reflects more the growth of the Korean American communities in the States, reflects more the fact that Korea has now become a much more prominent country. So I think my role status as the first Korean American U.S. ambassador to Korea has been a huge positive, and it's really helped me to do my job. Because as you know, diplomacy is much more than just government-to-government meetings. As much as I enjoy dealing with Ambassador Choi, there's a lot more to diplomacy, and public diplomacy is a huge element of it. So the fact that Korean public has embraced my role as the U.S. ambassador is a great asset for us in managing relations between the two countries.
Actually, I'd like to follow up, because you had some interesting comments earlier that when you deal, other Korean Americans who've been to Korea always have told me that as a Korean American, the Native Koreans expect them to act a certain way, expect them to agree and buy into certain things. Have you had that occur to you in your role? Do you think you've been treated differently by the Koreans because you're a Korean American?
I mean, I think if I look back at my earlier experiences in Korea, it was probably, I would say, maybe more awkward, because in a way people didn't really know whether to treat me as a U.S. diplomat or a Korean diplomat. But as I mentioned earlier, one of the most positive developments in Korea has been people's outlook and attitude. And I think Koreans in general are much more open-minded, much more global now. And so they understand that there is this thing called Korean Americans, or whatever, Korean Australian, Koreans who've lived overseas. And many of them are, in fact, returning to Korea because there are quite a few opportunities in the business sector. So if you look at American Chamber of Commerce in Korea, I would say about at least half of the country representatives from major companies are Korean Americans. So I think people are now much more used to the notion that Koreans go overseas, immigrate to other countries, and now come back as representatives, whether it's companies or governments or presidents, for the new home. So, in my role as the U.S. ambassador, I really haven't encountered any unreasonable expectations or demands, and I think that's a good thing.
In the back there? You can take that.
You know, Texas, state of Texas is so important in Korea. We have 2 consulate generals in your great state. The only state which has the same status is California, in Los Angeles and San Francisco. In both cities, we have direct flight from Seoul. So, as a British poet said, if winter has come, can spring be far behind? If you have 2 consulate generals in your state, can the day when you have direct flight be far behind?
You have my vote. I'm not sure it means anything, but
Perhaps you should ask the United representative over here, but I'm not going to point them out because they'll be besieged. But okay. Someday. Okay, yeah.
What is the, what is the reaction to the Indian government's deployment of battleships with respect to that particular issue? So, and I'd open that up to both ambassadors as well.
The South China Sea is very important for Korea because we depend our energy import, crucial energy import from Gulf state to the sea lane. So we have to absolutely have the freedom of maritime transportation in that area. We made it public as our basic foreign policy. And as a second principle, we recommended to resolve this issue by diplomacy, by non-violent means. And third, we support the code of conduct now under discussion among the ASEAN countries regarding this South China Sea. So we are basically on the same wavelength with American administration regarding that important issue. Having said this, if you understand East Asian culture, civilization, look into this, you will understand that East Asian nations usually do not resort to military means to resolve disputes, even territorial disputes. So I remain convinced that that issue, as long as the Daido Senkaku between China and Japan, And doctor, we don't recognize this is an issue, but still between Korea and Japan, will be dealt with within the framework of diplomacy and negotiation, not by war or military actions.
Ambassador?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we we don't take a position on these territorial disputes themselves, but we obviously have a very keen interest in freedom of navigation, and we also have a very keen interest in how these issues are addressed. And as Ambassador Choi suggests, what we expect is for these countries involved to resolve these issues, address these problems diplomatically and peacefully.
Let me ask one last follow-up, and then we'll end it because we are at the end. But the U.S. Ninth Fleet keeps the peace in that part of the world. And right now there's a big issue about military spending in the U.S. And as countries like Korea and others develop economically, I'm sure there will be calls for why should the U.S. be the one who pays to keep the peace and not get contributions from others in the region. What do you think is the future of how that's going to work out? Will the U.S. continue to always be the power that keeps the peace in that part of the world?
Well, I think in terms of the cost of stationing our troops on the peninsula, there's a process called the Special Measures Agreement, and we carefully negotiated burden sharing agreement in which the Korean government pays a certain percentage of the cost. And it's an ongoing process. In fact, I think the Korean agreement will expire next year. So we'll probably, beginning of next year, we'll start negotiations to try to come up with an equitable burden sharing arrangement. So I think that process will continue. It's not, it involves money, so I can't say that it's easy. But it's, as we do with many other issues, we work it out very carefully between the two governments. It's not at all acrimonious. So I'm confident that despite sort of the budgetary constraints on our side, that we will come up with a fair burden sharing arrangement for the future stationing of our troops on the Korean Peninsula.
Right. Well, unfortunately, the time has flown by. Let me thank you on behalf of all our people here and for sharing your great views on this part of the world. And I know you'll be able around later to say hello, but please join me in thanking our ambassadors.